Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Quena Johnson. I'm a dietetic student as well as Kaitlyn Seabrook and Connor Blake. We are going to be discussing today carbohydrates, the good, the bad, and the essential. So we have a few takeaways that we want to present to you through objectives. And these four are to be able to differentiate between simple and complex carbohydrates, to identify ways to incorporate simple and complex carbohydrates into your life, to motivate you to add more fiber and whole foods in your diet, and to be able to explain how simple and complex carbs are needed for exercise. So before we get started, if you have any questions during the presentation, we have numbers at the bottom right corner of each slide for you to write down and take a mental note or to put into the chat. And we will get back to the slides at the end of the PowerPoint. So today we are going to go through a poll, talk about simple carbohydrates, then talk about complex carbohydrates, have another fun poll time, and then go through fiber, exercising, and glycogen. So our first poll time, we will give you 30 seconds to give your answer to this question. But the question is, how many grams of sugar are in a single 12-ounce can of soda?
Yeah, and if you could just go ahead and type that into the chat box, just let us know what your thoughts are, and we'll kind of see what the playing field says. All right, so we're getting a good amount of answers back. Primarily, it looks like C and D is mostly you guys' answers. Let's see what it says.
Yes, and love the participation, by the way. Thank you. So the answer is 40 grams. And 40 grams is a lot if you don't know. And we will go into why you would want to know why there's so much grams of sugar in soda. So knowing what you eat is essential because being mindful of what you eat allows you to have control of what to add and take away when you want to make lifestyle changes. And the USDA makes dietary guidelines based off recent scientific findings that have been found to promote a longer and healthier life for the general public. Remember that just like life, everything is always changing, science is always evolving, so are the dietary recommendations. So make sure to look out for the guidelines. They update about every 5 years. And to go into more detail about sugar, because I went off on a tangent, the 2020 dietary guidelines recommend that you do not consume more than 10% of your total calories from added sugar. And based off of a 2,000 calorie diet, 40 grams of sugar is about 8% of those total calories. And that doesn't give you leniency for the rest of the day. So if you want to have a can of soda and then want to have one of your favorite bakery goods at the end of the day, you're kind of going over that 10% of total calories from added sugar. And that's not so fun. So if you follow the dietary guideline recommendations, you would want to be allocating almost all of your daily sugar intake into one can of soda. So now let's learn more about simple carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are recognized as, yes. Let's learn more about simple carbohydrates. I almost went too far. Simple carbohydrates are also known as simple sugars. They are one of the types of carbohydrates needed by your body to produce energy. This is the category where carbohydrates kind of get a bad reputation. Simple carbohydrates are separated into two categories, monosaccharides and disaccharides. Monosaccharides are glucose, galactose, and fructose, and disaccharides are sucrose, maltose, and lactose. And just a forewarning, I'm glad that we're doing this during lunch because most of you have a snack, But if you don't, we don't mind you stepping away and getting something because we have a few pictures that might make you a little hungry. So brace yourself. Why are simple carbohydrates bad? Simple carbohydrates are recognized as bad foods because refined foods fit into this category, like white bread, white rice, and sugars. People like refined sugars more because they taste good, for one. Who doesn't love a good white bread toast or white rice with your favorite food? But these taste good, and they're, after repeatedly exposing your body to that quick energy source, it might be easier for your brain to tell you to eat some blueberry pie versus a bran muffin. These simple carbohydrates cause blood sugar spikes that are not so gentle to your body. And by simple carbohydrates in this sentence, I meant the refined carbohydrates. Over time, if you keep repeating this process, you can put yourself at risk for type 2 diabetes. And this is why moderation is so important. Be it gentle with your body and space out those sweet treats. And to summarize, it is bad in excess, but in Western American, no, it is good in moderation, but in Western American diet culture, we definitely abuse simple carbohydrates. So the first monosaccharide I would like to talk about today is glucose. Glucose is an abundant simple sugar, and you can find it in almost anything. It's made by plants and most algae, but you can also convert things like protein and fats into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. And that goes into a whole different tangent, but we're going to keep it simple today. And glucose is basically the building blocks for your energy source. So when you see ATP, which is the result of all of these metabolic processes, it's equal to energy. So when you see ATP, think of energy. Glucose is the go-to source for making energy, just to reiterate. So your body will break down and rearrange all things carbohydrates to get to glucose. And glucose is everywhere. So don't try to hide from it. Don't be scared. It is okay. Just know how to make it work for you. So the next monosaccharide is galactose. And galactose is similar to glucose, but not quite. It is a simple sugar most known for being in dairy products, like this picture that I'm showing of low-fat yogurt with cherries, but can also be found in fruits and vegetables. So glucose is most effective when in creating energy for you, so your body easily changes galactose to glucose. Fructose is another simple sugar, and it is found in fruits, vegetables, and honey, but can also be processed and refined to make fructose powder, and it is usually paired with glucose to make fructose, which we will talk about next. So sucrose. Sucrose is a two-part disaccharide. That's what di means in disaccharides. It's two molecules put together. Sucrose is glucose and fructose. Sucrose is found in many fruits and vegetables, and mainly those root vegetables like carrots. So when you think of sucrose, the refined version is sugar. That's the most common sugar that you can get. And a fun fact to remember is that horses love sugar, but they also love carrots. So when you see people feeding horses, most of the time they give them a carrot, but if a farmer wants to treat their horse to a treat, they will give them sugar cubes, and horses love it. But another thing to also remember is whole foods are good and refined foods are not so good. So let's pick the carrot over the sugar cube in most cases. The second disaccharide I'll be talking about is maltose, and you get a double whammy of glucose when we're talking about maltose. Maltose is naturally found in barley, wheat, and many other grains, ancient grains, and peaches and pears also contain maltose. So you're getting that whole food version with peaches compared to that refined version with corn syrup. And maltodextrin, corn syrup, and acid thin starches are examples of maltose or have a lot of maltose within them and can be found in those sugar sweetened drinks like Coca-Cola, those processed foods, or alcohol like beer, for an example. So the last disaccharide that I'm going to be talking about today is lactose. And if you're familiar with it, you're either a health connoisseur or you're lactose intolerant. And I have this meme on the side of Elmo dancing, and he's talking about drinking a milkshake, knowing that he's lactose intolerant and is going to end up on the toilet later. But to sum it all up, lactose is the galactose and glucose disaccharide that's found in dairy. And if you love dairy, you love lactose, but not everyone's body loves lactose like we like lactose in a sense. Your mind and your gut might have a little fight every once in a while. Lactose intolerance is from the inability to break down that galactose and glucose and turn it into energy. So when you do not have enough of that lactase, and lactase is the enzyme that breaks galactose and glucose, it can cause those side effects of stomach aches, bloating, diarrhea, and more. So now I would like to talk a little bit about processing time. This goes back into why not simple, but refined foods and those whole food simple carbohydrates are taken into a different perspective. When you think of, I have these two pictures, and there's a guy eating ice, and then there's a person drinking water. And the reason I have these pictures on this slide is to show you the concept of processing time. So think of ice as a complex carbohydrate and water is a simple carbohydrate. Both can provide water for the system, but the ice takes a little longer to consume and it requires chewing or melting time. Or another way to think about it is when you're ordering a package from Amazon or any other place, there's a period of time between you buying the item and the actual shipping. So businesses need this time to prepare and make sure you're getting what you paid for. And your body kind of does the same thing. When you're eating something, those refined sugars, it's like an automatic processing time. And there's a time and a place for that. But with those complex carbohydrates, they're gentle to your body and gives your body business a little time to prepare for digesting your carbohydrates and making energy. So our body just goes through this natural process of digesting food. The quicker your body recognizes what you've eaten, the easier it is for your body to convert those sugars into energy. And there's a time and a place for everything. It's great under certain contexts, but not great for other scenarios. So glycemic index, if you know someone with type 2 diabetes or any type 1 diabetes, this might be a familiar term for you. But if not, we're going to break it down today so that it's A-okay. Glycemic index rates is basically a scale of how glucose is easily available for your body to process energy production. Glycemic index is a scale from 1 to 100 that values how quickly consuming a certain food can affect your blood sugar. So 1 would be one of the complex carbohydrates that take a long time to digest and get that energy from. And then 100 is straight up glucose. Oh, I digested. We have ATP. We know what to do right now. So if you have diabetes or at risk for diabetes, this is super important to know because you want to gauge how fast your body responds to certain carbohydrates. But it is also, it really should be taught to the general public because you can abuse your body's capabilities. So the more that you eat these high glycemic index foods, your body can have those blood glucose spikes And after doing it over and over again, your body will not like it, and then you'll suffer from some adverse effects, being pre-diabetic and soon to be diabetic. And another way to think of glycemic index is to use the phrase gentle inside. So when you're lowering yourself on the glycemic index scale, that's more gentle food compared to eating 100% or over that 70 glycemic index mark. And this is super complicated, and I hope it doesn't fly over anyone's head because it can take a long time to really get all this information. So it is important to talk with your dietitian and know how to make simple carbohydrates work well for you. And also having a stable blood sugar level is important because too much or too little of blood sugar can not only make you ill, but can damage your organs and even lead to organ failure in long-term scenarios. So just remember to space your workload in essence, or to give your body processing time. So to wrap up simple carbohydrates, these are the takeaways that I really want you to get from my section. Glucose is the love of your body's life. You need glucose in order to survive, and it is everywhere for a reason. Pick whole food, simple carbs over refined carbs, like picking peaches over that white bread. The refined carbs are the bad boys of this rodeo, not your fruits and vegetables. But there's also a time and a place. So if you can learn how to make those simple carbohydrates work for you, that's great. And honestly, the most important part, do not deprive yourself.
So now we're going to move on to talking about complex carbs. And my name is Kaitlyn, so this will be the section that we'll talk about. So let's move on to complex carbs. So complex carbs are typically referred to as our good carbs, and they are different from simple carbohydrates because they are not broken down as quickly to be used for energy. So like Quena was saying, they're made of mono and disaccharide units, just one or two, but whereas these complex carbs are made from long chains of sugars, and it takes longer to unlink those chains and break them down. So meaning these carbs serve as our long-term energy sources, and they are found in foods like whole grains, beans, potatoes, and oatmeal. So think more of our starchy vegetables. And carbs like these provide us with more fiber, vitamins, minerals, and are more beneficial to our gut health. So why are they more beneficial for our GI health? Well, kind of like Quena was just touching on, since they are made from longer chains of molecules, it takes longer to break them down, it takes longer to process them. And this causes a steady release of energy throughout the day, meaning complex carbohydrates are considered our low glycemic index foods. So if you look to the orange line on the graph, you see that it's the steady release of energy throughout the day. That's because, like we were talking about, they're made of those longer chains of sugars. They're going to take a little longer to digest. And then if you see the high GI with the red line, it's a sharp increase and a sharp decrease. Those are those simple carbs that are going to give you quick energy, they're quick to break down. And that's what she was talking about with the refined foods. Those are going to be like your cookies, your cakes, things like that, that give you that quick burst of energy. So another benefit to complex carbs too, and the reason why it also gives you a longer extended release of energy, is because complex carbs help you to feel fuller longer. So now we're getting to why do they actually take longer to break down, like we've been talking about. They're long chains of sugars, and they're actually called polysaccharides. So it's 3 or more monosaccharides, and poly just means much or many, and saccharide, it means sugar. So altogether, it just means many sugars. And these polysaccharides can be made from several hundred thousands of monosaccharides. They're extremely large molecules. And examples of these are amylose, amylopectin, and glycogen. And their main function is to be used as storage until we need them for energy later. So the first polysaccharide we're going to talk about is amylose. And amylose is important for plant energy storage. And it's made from many glucose molecules to form a straight chain. So if you look at this picture, I just put this in here because it's nice to reference something and be able to put your eyes on it and actually kind of visualize it. So those are glucose molecules, and they are linked together in that straight chain like we were talking about. And these are found in your starches. So think your starchy vegetables, parsnips, squash, plantains, peas. So the next one we're going to be talking about is amylopectin. And amylopectin is extremely similar to amylose. There's a couple differences which we'll talk about. So it is also important for plant energy storage. It is found in starches, and it is also made from glucose molecules, but it forms a branched molecule. So if you look down to the picture, you see that it's in that straight chain of glucose, and then you see it branches up, and that's why it's different than amylose. And foods with amylopectin are the same as those with amylose. So it's starchy vegetables, beans, and squash, and it's also found in grains, quinoa, and rice. And probably the most important polysaccharide we talk about is glycogen. And glycogen is made from glucose molecules, and it is extremely branched. So it is a very large molecule, and it is extremely important for us as humans, because glycogen is the storage form of glucose. And what this basically means is any carb that we eat eventually gets broken down into glucose. And like Quena touched on, glucose is our energy. It's what we use to make ATP. So it's extremely important to us. So whenever we're eating these carbs and we make glucose, if we eat them in excess, then they have to be stored to be used later. And how they're stored is in the form of glycogen. And they're stored in the liver and the muscles to be used when we need them. And so the glycogen has the function of keeping our body fueled. So when we exercise, our muscles use our glycogen stores to give us energy. And when our blood sugar is low, the liver is in charge of maintaining our blood sugar for our entire body and starts to export glycogen as glucose to the blood. So what are some benefits of complex carbs? We've kind of talked about some. They're a long-term energy storage. They keep our body fueled because they give us that extended, steady glucose release, and it helps to maintain our blood sugar levels. And they give us all around a better balanced diet. So what are some foods that we can incorporate? Some whole grains, starchy vegetables, and legumes. And these are important, especially because whole grains, when talking about whole grains, why we want whole grains in our diet is because they haven't been stripped of their nutrients. And so they're not really processed, unlike the refined grains that we were talking about. So they still have all of their vital energy and nutrients. And these foods are more nutrient dense, not calorie dense. And the vital energy and nutrients that they provide us with would be fiber, and it's extremely important for us. So kind of diving deeper into calorie dense versus nutrient dense, which we kind of just touched on just a little bit in the last slide. So calorie dense is actually referring to those foods that are higher in calories, but very low in overall nutrients. So these are going to be more of our cookies and our snack cakes. Think about that. And these are our refined foods, our processed foods. And like we were talking about, these have been stripped and processed of all of their good nutrients and no longer have their beneficial effects for us. And so nutrient dense is the foods that are talking about that are high in nutrients and low in calories. So this is going to be like fruits. And yes, fruits are simple sugars and they give us quick energy, but these are more nutrient dense than something like a cookie. And another example for nutrients would be celery with peanut butter or whole wheat toast. And these are foods that most of your nutrients, like we're talking about, are still intact. And one of the most important nutrient found in whole wheat bread is fiber. So fiber, just to introduce to you guys, it's very important. We love fiber. Fiber is a type of nutrient that we cannot break down. And there are two types, dietary and functional fiber. And Connor will go into a little bit more detail of that later. And dietary and functional fiber is your total fiber together. Fiber is mostly either insoluble or soluble. And insoluble fiber speeds up passage of foods through the GI tract, and it's used to treat constipation. Soluble fiber, it decreases the speed of passage of foods through the GI tract, and it's better for reducing cholesterol and weight loss. Another benefit to fiber is fiber also decreases the speed at which food is broken down. So again, adding to those low glycemic foods, the more fiber something has, the lower in glycemic index it will be. And most of us as Americans, we typically never meet our recommended intake of fiber. We're pretty low usually on that. And so we thought it would be beneficial for y'all to see the actual recommended of fiber. So for females, it's 25 grams a day, and males is 38 grams a day. But for individuals who are over 50, it changes a little bit. So women over 50, you have grams a day, and men over 50, you have about 30 grams a day. So these are some examples of complex carbs, which we've talked about a few times, but just to give you guys a better picture of them. There are starchy vegetables like we've been talking about, our starches like potatoes. We have butternut squash, parsnips, sweet potatoes, peas, whole grains, corn, whole wheat bread, and carrots. So we actually have our next poll question, yay, so the question is, which food takes the longest to digest? And so just like the first one, please put your answer in the chat. So we have A for strawberries, B for whole grain bread, C for white bread toast, and D blueberry pie. I'm getting some responses. I'll give you guys a few more seconds.
Yes, a lot of B's.
Seeing a lot of B's.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So we've seen a lot of B's, which is good. Okay. So moving on then. Okay. So then you guys who answered B, you guys would be correct. It's whole grain bread. And we're going to talk about why this is in this slide. So just to kind of tie everything up, whole grain bread is a complex carb and it's filled with fiber, which, like we said, decreases the speed of breakdown in the body. And so when you think about it, the less processed a food is, the more processing we have to do to break it down, which is good because then this causes that low glycemic index food that we've been talking about. So the more complex, the more fiber, the less processing, the lower the glycemic food to provide us with more energy throughout the day. And the reason why it wasn't the white bread toast was because white bread has been processed to remove those whole grains and other nutrients. So maybe just something to think about when you're in the store and looking at different breads. So when you are looking at it, pull out a whole wheat bread and look at the ingredients list. And if the first thing you see is whole or whole wheat, then you know that you have all those good nutrients that we've been talking about in the bread still, and it hasn't been refined or processed. And so like we were talking about, the more processed or broken down a food already is, the less time it takes to digest. Now, strawberries weren't the right answer because they are simple carbohydrates filled with the monosaccharide fructose. So like we talked about, they're going to give you the quick burst of energy that you need and fuel you for a short time. So this would be a good little snack if you're feeling a little hungry, but you don't have time to make a full meal. That would be perfectly fine. So then the blueberry pie also wasn't the correct answer because it is mostly simple carbohydrates to be made into quick sugars for the body. So to sum everything up, complex carbohydrates are considered to be our good carbs. So don't be afraid of them. They're extremely useful. Carbs are our main source of energy for the body. They have a ton of functions that are incredibly important. And they are made from polysaccharides, which are amylose, amylopectin, and glycogen, which take longer to digest and break down because there's those long chains of sugars that will eventually all get broken down to glucose. And just remember, glycogen is our storage form. So it is extremely important to us to build our glycogen stores whenever we eat carbohydrates in excess. And complex carbs provide us with the fuel we need to get us through the day. They help us to feel fuller, lowers glycemic index, and are high in fiber and other nutrients. So try to eat more whole grains, legumes, and starchy vegetables.
All right, so I'm going to take it from here. And you guys have heard all about simple and complex carbohydrates, but there's more to it than just that. And so something we're going to dive into a little more in depth is fiber. And so why do we always harp on fiber? You always hear those in the dietetic or nutritional space talk about fiber. And Kaitlyn mentioned something that's very important to remember is most of us do not get a lot of fiber within our diets. And one of the main reasons they're so important is fiber is very high in nutrient content and low in calories. And that's pretty uncommon in most of our diets. A lot of the times we're finding foods that are high in calories and low in nutrients. And so to find that inverse relationship to something that's got a lot of nutrients versus calories is pretty rare. And we want to incorporate that as much as we can within our diet. So we talked about dietary and functional fibers, but what's really the difference between the two? So Kaitlyn touched on just a little bit how the dietary fiber is just non-digestible carbs that are naturally occurring in plants, and they may provide a little bit of calories. And functional fiber is going to be the non-digestible carbohydrates that have benefits beyond just the calories, and they have effect on our health, and it's good for human physiology that we'll talk about. So some benefits that you'll find with consuming a high functional fiber diet. Number one is fiber will promote fullness or satiety, which is beneficial for weight loss. So one of the key problems that people face whenever they're trying to reduce their calories for weight loss is they're hungry throughout the day. And if you're able to promote that fullness for longer by incorporating fiber in, then you're already getting an advantage of what you otherwise wouldn't have if you didn't consume your daily fiber. Fiber, like we talked about with the glycemic index, can help stabilize your blood sugar, which is important for those with diabetes. It's been associated with lower instances of chronic diseases. It's got reducing the risk of colon cancer and diverticulitis. It reduces the risk associated with cardiovascular disease. It can also reduce your risk of heart disease by lowering total cholesterol. And we'll talk about a little bit more of that here in a little bit, and what foods can really impact your cholesterol. It can aid in bowel movements to eliminate waste, like we talked about with insoluble fiber, or it can help with diarrhea, which is the soluble fibers. And again, we'll talk about these types of foods that you can incorporate within your diet if you have any of these issues. And then another thing I want to just keep reiterating it is they're high in nutrients and low in calories. And so that's very rare, and we want to get those in when we can. So two common functional fiber groups I want you guys to remember today are beta-glucans and cellulose. Now there's more functional fibers than just these, but these will probably be the more common ones that you would see or be able to recognize to be able to add in your diet. So beta-glucans are going to be soluble fibers that are found in the walls of plants, oats, and barley, and these are going to be beneficial for decreasing risks of heart disease by lowering cholesterol. So your beta-glucans are found, like we talked about, in oats and barley, but also things like mushrooms and whole grains. Cellulose is an insoluble fiber that helps with digestion and eliminating waste. And so cellulose is just a structural component that's found within plants and their cells and their cell walls, and it can be found in foods like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, wheat, cauliflower, peas, soy. So an easy way to remember cellulose is usually your dark green vegetables, your leafy vegetables, and so we want to get those in when we can, because it's going to help with a lot of health benefits. So whenever we're talking about functional fiber classifications, soluble and insoluble fibers, some two easy ways to remember. I've got a strong, healthy heart over here pumping his muscles up. So think about soluble fiber is going to have great benefits for your heart, and insoluble fiber is usually more beneficial for your digestion and your stomach. So that's why you got a happy stomach on the right. So some points that we're reiterating is soluble fiber will slow down digestion. It can help with diarrhea. It's also linked with decreasing the risk of heart disease through lowering your LDL cholesterol and decreasing total cholesterol. So if you've got high cholesterol levels and can start incorporating more soluble fibers within your diet, you're already going to be putting yourself in a better position. So beta-glucans, like we just talked about, that's usually your most commonly associated soluble fiber that you can think of. And we'll talk about some oatmeal and other sources that are usually good sources of soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber, like we said earlier, can keep you regular, speeds up passage time, and can prevent constipation. Insoluble fibers are linked with lowering risks associated with colon cancer and diverticular disease. And cellulose, like we just mentioned, that is going to be one of your prime examples of an insoluble fiber. So one of the things before I even mention any of these foods is a lot of foods that contain either soluble or insoluble fiber will have have both. And so it's not exclusive to just having that particular soluble fiber or that particular insoluble fiber in your food sources, but these examples are typically higher in one more than the other, but that doesn't mean they lack both of them. So some good soluble fiber sources, like we talked about, oatmeal is usually the number one soluble fiber go-to that people can think of and remember, and that's easy to remember when you look at the packages. They have that heart on the front, and that is associating it with the lowering of your cholesterol, which is good for your heart health. So soluble fibers like oatmeal, great for lowering cholesterol and heart health. Other foods would be like nuts, like almonds, avocados, apples, blueberries, sweet potatoes, beans. So beans or legumes are also really high in usually both soluble and insoluble fibers. So I just wanted to put that in there because black beans may have a little bit more soluble fiber, but beans typically have quite a bit of both. Insoluble fibers would be things like brown rice, wheat bran, couscous, the food so nice I named it twice, cucumbers, and carrots. And so we talked about fiber. That's great. It's fantastic. added into your diet. We really want you to eat more fiber. I promise you, we don't talk about it enough and we don't eat it enough, but we should talk about it more because it's great. But it's not the greatest for energy if you're needing to get additional fuel sources for powering your physical activity. And part of that has to do with the fact that fiber is one of those non-digestible carbs, so you're not getting a whole lot of calories out of it. So now we're going to figure out how you can incorporate both simple and complex carbs into your diet and can properly fuel daily activity and exercise. So like Quena talked about, the primary function of carbohydrates is to provide energy for regular bodily functions, movement, and activity. And if you're eating adequate carbohydrates within your diet, your body will use it to fuel things such as brain activity, movement, digestion, respiration, and exercise. So think about more carbohydrates, overall higher energy. Whenever they're eaten in excess, they're stored as a reserve energy, like we talked about earlier, was glycogen. So Kaitlyn talked about glycogen and how it's the storage form of carbohydrates or glucose in your body for energy. And it can be a reserve that's utilized when you have inadequate fuel that's available in your bloodstream. So like Quena talked about with simple sugars and glucose, if you have inadequate fuel source in your bloodstream, glycogen can be broken down and that can be used as your energy source. So when your blood sugar is too low, your body taps in to that glycogen and then releases those stored carbohydrates or glucose molecules to allow your body's cells to then pick them up and take them in and utilize it for fuel. But there's a caveat to glycogen, and if you're not eating enough carbohydrate, if your blood sugar can drop too low, if you're exercising for longer than 60 minutes and haven't had enough carbohydrate, if you haven't eaten for a long period of time, leaving your body in a fasting state. So think about if you didn't eat a whole lot of carbohydrates the day before, you went to sleep, you wake up, you don't have carbohydrates for breakfast. So pretty common that a lot of people do low carbohydrate diet. When you go for that prolonged period of time, you can be in a fasting state without eating. And if you haven't had carbohydrates, then your blood sugar can drop and that can leave you with low energy and inadequate carbohydrate consumption for a long period of time. That's just pretty common for people that experience low energy as they're having low blood sugar levels. And exercising causes an increased need to utilize those carbohydrates or glucose for that energy. And if you're eating adequate carbohydrates consistently, you can prevent needing to always tap into your glycogen and you will have more readily available fuel to power activity. But the caveat, like we were talking about, if you consistently eat too low of carbohydrates, you can start to run into low energy levels from a lack of fuel. So we got Mr. Joe over here. Mr. Joe's been on a really low carb keto diet and he's just not feeling very good and he doesn't have a whole lot of energy. And that's because he hasn't had enough carbohydrate. So there's a relationship between low carbohydrate and glycogen and energy levels. And so when you're forced to tap into that glycogen for the additional carbohydrate or the additional fuel, you can use that to continue to fuel your activity for a duration of time. But that's it, a duration. There's a limited amount of glycogen you have within your body. And so low carbohydrate consumption will force you to tap into those glycogens more often and provide glucose for energy. But glycogen depletion and replenishment isn't immediate. It's a graduate process. So the more often that you are tapping into it or the more often you're fueling it will dictate what your glycogen reserves or energy reserves would be like. And so if you continue to inadequately consume carbohydrates, then we're forced to use glycogen too often. And if you're using it too often, you can actually run out of, an adequate amount that would be needed for that physical activity. And that can leave you with those low energy levels where you just don't have the motivation, what you feel like to get through and power your physical activity. So this is where simple sugars can be utilized, and simple sugars can be consumed to increase blood glucose and provide additional energy required to fully complete your exercise activity. And so this is what we kind of want to reiterate is that there's a time and a place for simple carbohydrates. So you don't have to just hate on them all the time. They can be good for certain reasons. If you're using them as just a means to eat a bunch of sweets, that's not necessarily beneficial. But you can use simple carbohydrates to fuel activity because they can provide that immediate energy that we talked about, like with that glycemic index and those spikes. So simple carbohydrates will often get a bad reputation because they typically lack additional nutrients. And so, we talked about fiber and having, high nutrient density and low calories, and that's great. And we usually want to avoid the high calorie, low nutrient dense foods. And so that's what we're trying to reiterate here is that simple carbohydrates can be used for exercise when used appropriately. And so they're a great fuel source before you exercise because they are digested very fast. And it's best to kind of eat them between 30 to 45 minutes or an hour before exercising. And the goal or the reason behind this is it allows you to have time to digest that food. And so you may not have GI irritation before you go into your activity or exercises. And so these are just some examples that I wanted to kind of let you guys look at when it comes to pre-exercise snacks. So my number one go-to on here is fresh fruit. So for example, before I exercise, literally every single time before I exercise, I eat a banana about 45 minutes before I go and work out. And for me, it settles with my stomach well. It doesn't bother me. It always provides me just that extra little oomph that I need if I don't feel like I've had enough carbohydrate intake, and it digests quickly. So you can't go wrong with fresh fruits as long as they agree with your stomach. Some other options are dry cereals or granola, peanut butter and jelly, or toast with honey. Honey is a great source of a simple sugar. Frozen waffles, you can go back to your childhood days, get some of those Eggos if you want. It's really not a bad option if you want some carbohydrate. Pretzels or crackers are good choices. And so the other one that I really wanted to touch on here is Gatorade, sports drinks, Gatorade Powerade. So these have gotten a really bad reputation over the last couple of years. I'm sure you guys have seen, the Gatorade Zero, which has, the 0 calories, zero sugar for Gatorade. And Gatorade and Powerade get this knock that they're bad because they're high in sugar. But that's the point. They're high in sugar because they're meant to be a fuel source or a post-fuel source for activity. And so by you getting that sugar intake that's within those Powerades or those Gatorades, those simple sugars that are in there will give you that quick energy that you will need after or before you've powered your workout. So if you just prefer to drink Gatorade for the flavor, and then that's where the Gatorade Zero, may come in play, and you can drink on it and not have to worry about the caloric intake. But if you're exercising, it's not the most beneficial to just drink Gatorade Zero because it has no additional energy for what you would need for your activity. So some other options would be like applesauce, bagels, white rice or potatoes. A lot of those are broken down easily and can digest quickly, and those can provide adequate carbohydrates to fuel activity. So in summary, simple sugars are high glycemic foods. They're often high in calories and low in nutrient content. So you can think of simple sugars as like added sugar to food, soda, candy, but that isn't exclusive to that. There are some simple sugars that have some nutrients like fruit, like we just talked about. Complex carbohydrates are lower glycemic index foods, and incorporating more complex carbohydrates will include better overall food variety, and it's better for your overall health to have more variety within your daily diet. Everyone eat more fiber, please. I hope you got that out of this presentation more than anything, as we all need to eat more fiber. High in nutrients, lower in calories, and will promote fullness. So if you're ever in that point where you do feel like you need to, maybe drop a few pounds if you want to go on a diet, fiber should be a staple for you to incorporate because it'll promote that fullness. It's got a lot of health benefits on top of the fullness, such as your heart and digestive health, and they're great for health, but not the best for energy. And so that's why I want you to understand that. And so adequate carbohydrate consumption is needed for physical activity and overall energy levels. So like what Quena said earlier, don't be scared of carbohydrates. They're not the devil. They're not the enemy. You do need them to fuel your activity. And so if you do want to have a good exercise routine, you need a good carbohydrate consumption. And then simple carbohydrates are beneficial for exercise, but we want to reduce added sugars into our diet. So just remember, there's a time and a place for simple sugars. So if you do want to get those sugars in to fuel some activity, if you think that you may need that extra carbohydrate for it, then that's fine, but just be mindful of your overall caloric intake and added sugars, and you want to reduce that sugar intake to less than 10% of your overall calorie needs based on the dietary guidelines from the USDA. And so I hope that you guys have gotten enough of a rundown on carbohydrates. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know.